The man stood in the dark bedroom with a gun pointed at them, his voice calm, almost polite, as if he were asking for directions instead of taking control of their lives. The woman was shaking so badly she could barely breathe. Her hands were already tied. A blindfold was pulled tight over her eyes. She could hear her boyfriend breathing beside her, frozen in fear, unable to move. The intruder told them both that if they followed instructions, no one would be hurt. Minutes later, she was led out of her own house, barefoot, in the middle of the night. She was placed into the trunk of a car. The lid slammed shut, the engine started, and just like that, she was taken from home. She did not know where she was going. She did not know how far she would be taken. She did not know if she would ever see daylight again. What she did not know yet was that this nightmare would cross state lines, confuse police departments, and become one of the most disturbing real abduction cases in modern American history. And the worst part was still coming. The story did not begin with the abduction. It began weeks earlier with something that seemed harmless at first, a strange email, a warning that no one took seriously, a quiet buildup that led to a night where safety vanished forever. This was not a random crime. This was planned. Denise Huskins lived a normal life in California. She worked hard, kept to herself, and trusted that home was the one place she was safe. Her boyfriend, Aaron Quinn, believed the same. They locked their doors. They lived quietly. There was nothing about their home that suggested it would become the center of a nationwide investigation. But someone had been watching. Late one night, while they slept, a man broke into their house. He did not smash a window. He did not kick down a door. He came prepared. He moved silently. He woke them with a flashlight in their faces and a gun in his hand. Before either of them could react, he was in control. The intruder tied Aaron's hands. He warned him not to move. He told Denise she was being kidnapped. He said this was not personal. He said he would release her later if everything went as planned. Nothing about this felt real. Denise believed she was dreaming. Her body felt heavy. Her thoughts raced. She tried to remember every detail, every sound, every word, because something inside her told her she might need it to survive. The man forced her to put on goggles that blocked her vision. Headphones covered her ears. She could no longer hear Aaron. She could no longer see anything. She was led outside and placed inside the trunk. The car drove for hours. She felt every turn, every bump. She tried to count time, but fear made it impossible. At some point, she crossed state lines. She did not know that yet, but investigators later would. The distance would become a problem, jurisdiction would become a problem, and disbelief would become the biggest problem of all. Back at the house, Aaron was left behind. The intruder warned him not to call the police right away. He said if Aaron contacted anyone too soon, Denise would be killed. When the man finally left, Aaron waited, shaking, counting minutes. Then he called 911. What should have been treated as a serious kidnapping was immediately questioned. Police arrived. They listened. They looked around. And then they began to doubt the story. There were no signs of forced entry. No neighbors heard anything. No witnesses saw a car. To some officers, it sounded too strange, too perfect, too rehearsed. Within hours, suspicion turned toward Aaron himself. While Denise was being held somewhere far away, blindfolded and alone, police were interrogating the man who loved her as if he were the suspect. They asked him the same questions again and again. They accused him of lying. They suggested the kidnapping was fake. Meanwhile, Denise was moved into a small room. She was restrained. She was threatened. But she was also given strange instructions. Her captor told her she would be released. He told her this was part of something bigger. He told her not to fight. Days passed. The media got involved. And when police publicly suggested the kidnapping was a hoax, the story exploded. Denise was called a liar. Aaron was called a killer. Online, strangers mocked the case. Few believed a woman had truly been taken from her home without a trace.
Then, suddenly, something happened that no one expected. Denise was released. She appeared alive, shaken but breathing. She contacted her family. She told them she had been abducted. She said everything was real. She said the nightmare was true. Instead of relief, she was met with disbelief. Police did not welcome her as a victim. They treated her as part of a lie. They accused her of staging her own kidnapping. They said she wasted resources. They said there was no crime. But the truth was waiting quietly. Months later, another woman was attacked in a similar way. Same method, same calm voice, same control. This time, evidence was undeniable. DNA was found. The attacker was caught. He confessed. He admitted to abducting Denise from her home. He admitted to transporting her across state lines. He admitted to planning everything. The nightmare was real. But for Denise, justice came late. The damage was already done. She had survived an abduction, only to be accused of making it up.
This case would later expose failures in law enforcement communication, the danger of assumptions, and how easily victims can be blamed when a crime does not fit expectations. And just when the truth finally began to surface, another shocking detail emerged, something the public had never been told. Something that changed how this crime would be remembered forever. The moment Denise Huskins reappeared alive should have ended the nightmare. It should have been the moment police admitted they were wrong. It should have been the moment the story shifted from suspicion to sympathy. Instead, it became the moment everything turned darker. Denise contacted her family from a safe location. Her voice was weak. She sounded terrified. She said she had been kidnapped. She said she had been held against her will. She said everything Aaron had told police was true. Police did not believe her. Within hours, authorities publicly announced that they believed the kidnapping was a hoax. They claimed Denise and Aaron had made the entire story up. They suggested it was a strange lover's scheme gone wrong. They told the media there was no danger to the public. Those words spread fast. News outlets repeated them. Social media exploded. Denise was no longer seen as a victim. She was labeled a liar, a fake, a woman seeking attention. Aaron was called unstable, dangerous, guilty. All of this happened while Denise was still trying to process the fact that she had been taken from her home, locked in a trunk, and transported across state lines. When police finally spoke directly to Denise, the questioning felt more like an interrogation than a rescue. They asked why she didn't scream, why she followed instructions, why there was no physical damage to the house, why her story sounded too perfect. Denise tried to explain what fear does to the human body. She explained how she believed she would die if she resisted. She explained the blindfold, the headphones, the gun, the calm voice that made everything feel unreal. None of it mattered. Investigators had already made up their minds. Behind the scenes, something important was being ignored. The details Denise described were not random. The method, the planning, the restraint, the transportation. These were not the actions of two people staging a lie. These were the actions of someone who had done this before or was preparing to do it again. But no one listened. For months, the case stalled. There was no active search for an abductor because police insisted there was none. Denise and Aaron were left to deal with public humiliation, trauma, and isolation. Friends stopped calling. Strangers sent hateful messages. Their lives collapsed. Then, hundreds of miles away, another woman was attacked. In a different city, a masked man broke into a home at night. He used the same quiet approach, the same control, the same threatening calmness. He restrained the victim. But this time, something went wrong for him. The woman fought back. She managed to escape. And when police investigated this new crime, they found something undeniable: DNA. Clear evidence, proof that the attacker was real. When the suspect was arrested, everything changed. The man's name was Matthew Muller. He was not random. He was not impulsive. He was highly educated, intelligent, careful, and deeply disturbed. During questioning, Muller did something no one expected.
He confessed to abducting Denise Huskins. He described the home. He described the blindfold, the headphones, the trunk, the drive across state lines. He confirmed details only the real abductor could know. He had kept recordings. He had planned everything. The kidnapping was real. The nightmare was real. And the biggest failure was not the crime itself. It was what happened after. When the truth came out, police were forced to face what they had done. They had dismissed a real victim. They had publicly shamed her. They had stopped an investigation that could have prevented another attack. Interagency communication failures became impossible to ignore. Local police had not connected reports from other areas. Warnings were missed. Patterns were ignored. A dangerous man had been free because authorities believed a lie instead of evidence. Denise and Aaron were finally cleared, but being cleared did not erase the damage. Denise later described how surviving the abduction was only part of the trauma. Being accused of lying hurt just as deeply. She said the moment police called the case a hoax felt like being kidnapped all over again, this time by disbelief. The public slowly changed its view. Sympathy replaced suspicion. Anger replaced mockery. People began asking hard questions about how victims are treated when their stories do not fit expectations. Matthew Muller was sentenced to decades in prison. The legal system finally acknowledged the truth, but no sentence could return what was taken. Home would never feel the same again. Trust would never feel the same again. And just when it seemed the story had reached its end, another revelation surfaced, one that showed this crime could have been stopped earlier. A warning sign had existed long before Denise was taken from her home. It existed in reports that were written, filed, and then forgotten. And when investigators finally uncovered it, the realization hit hard. This abduction did not come out of nowhere. It could have been stopped. Matthew Muller had been on the radar before. In another city, months earlier, a woman reported a break-in that felt strange and calculated. The intruder had entered quietly. He had spoken calmly. He had controlled the situation without rushing. He had left behind fear, confusion, and a sense that something worse was coming. That report did not lead to an arrest.
It did not lead to a statewide alert. It did not lead to a shared warning across police departments. And because of that, Muller continued. When detectives finally connected the earlier incident to Denise's case, the pattern was clear. The same tools, the same method, the same level of planning, the same belief that he was smarter than everyone else. The crime was not random, it was rehearsed. This realization forced law enforcement agencies to confront an uncomfortable truth. The system had failed not once, but multiple times. Communication between departments broke down. Information stayed locked in files instead of being shared, and the belief that the kidnapping was fake shut down any chance of early discovery. For Denise, learning this was devastating. She had survived being taken from her home. She had survived captivity. She had survived public shame. And now she had to live with the knowledge that her suffering might have been prevented. Still, she chose to speak. Denise and Aaron eventually told their story publicly, not for attention, not for sympathy, but to show what happens when victims are not believed. Denise spoke about fear, about how the calm voice of her abductor was more terrifying than shouting, about how following instructions felt like the only way to stay alive. She also spoke about what happened after she was released, how disbelief felt heavier than chains, how being called a liar made her question reality itself. Her words changed conversations across the country. Police departments began reviewing how they handle kidnapping reports. Training programs were updated. Victim advocacy became part of discussions that once focused only on suspects. The case became a lesson taught to officers about listening, about patience, and about never deciding the truth too early. Matthew Muller now sits in prison, serving a long sentence for what he did. He will never again walk freely into another home. He will never again place someone in a trunk and drive into the night. But his capture came at a cost. Denise's sense of safety was gone forever. Home was no longer a place of rest. It was a reminder that even locked doors can fail, a reminder that danger does not always announce itself loudly. Yet Denise refused to disappear into silence. She continued to speak about survival, about strength, about how believing victims can save lives. Her story reached millions, and in doing so, it helped others come forward, others who feared they would not be believed. This is why this case still matters, because it was not just about being taken from home, it was about what happened after, about how truth can be ignored, about how authority can be wrong, and about how one voice can still make a difference. In the end, this was a real American abduction nightmare, not because of how it began, but because of how close it came to being erased. And as long as cases like this exist, the question remains, how many warnings are still being missed right now? How many doors are being watched? How many victims are waiting to be believed? That question lingers, and it should. This is where the story ends, but the lesson does not. If this case stayed with you, remember this: sometimes the most dangerous place is where we feel safest, and sometimes the truth is the last thing people want to hear. The night never truly ended for Denise. Even after the courtrooms went quiet and the headlines faded, the memory stayed alive in small, ordinary moments. A locked door, a sudden noise, a car slowing down outside. Home, the place meant to protect, had become the place where fear first entered. For a long time, Denise tried to return to a normal life. She tried to sleep. She tried to work. She tried to believe that what happened to her was over. But trauma does not follow rules. It comes back without warning, pulling you into the past when you least expect it. Matthew Muller had been sentenced. The law had spoken. On paper, justice had been served. But justice does not erase fear. It does not erase the sound of a trunk closing or the feeling of being powerless in your own home. What stayed with Denise most was not only the abduction, but the silence that followed it. The silence from people who should have protected her. The silence that allowed doubt to grow louder than truth. She began to understand that her story was bigger than herself.
This was not just about one woman taken from her home. This was about how systems respond when a crime does not look the way they expect it to. About how quickly victims can be turned into suspects. About how disbelief can cause as much damage as violence. Denise and Aaron eventually took legal action, not for revenge, but for accountability. They wanted acknowledgement. They wanted change. They wanted the record to reflect the truth they had lived through. The settlement that followed was not an apology, but it was a statement. A statement that mistakes had been made. A statement that harm had occurred. A statement that could not undo the past, but might protect someone else in the future. Behind closed doors, law enforcement agencies reviewed the case again and again. Training materials were updated, procedures were rewritten. Officers were reminded that real crimes do not always fit clean patterns, that fear can look like calm, that survival can look like cooperation. The phrase "gone girl kidnapping" slowly disappeared from official language. It was replaced with something far more accurate: a real abduction, a real victim, a real failure. Denise chose to speak publicly one last time, not to relive the horror, but to reclaim her story. She spoke clearly, simply, without anger. She explained what it feels like to be taken from your home and then told it never happened. She explained how disbelief can make a person doubt their own memories, how being questioned again and again can feel like punishment, how survival sometimes looks nothing like what movies teach us to expect. Her words reached people who had been silent for years, people who had been hurt and ignored, people who had stayed quiet because they feared they would not be believed. That may be the most powerful part of this story. Not the crime itself, but what came after. Today, the house where Denise was taken stands like any other. Quiet, ordinary, no sign of what happened inside its walls. To a stranger, it is just another home on another street. But that is the truth about abduction nightmares. They do not announce themselves. They do not warn you. They arrive quietly where you feel safest. This case reminds us that danger does not always look violent. Sometimes it looks calm. Sometimes it speaks softly. Sometimes it waits patiently while the world looks the other way. And it reminds us of something even more important. Belief matters. Listening matters. Because when warnings are ignored and victims are doubted, the cost is measured in lives changed forever. Denise Huskins survived being taken from her home. She survived captivity. She survived public doubt. And by telling her story, she helped ensure that this nightmare would not be repeated in silence. This is why the case still matters. Because somewhere, right now, someone may be knocking on the wrong door, and someone else may be waiting to be believed.
This story ends here, but the lesson does not. And the question remains, when the next warning appears, will anyone listen in time? Home is supposed to be the safest place in the world. It is where we sleep, where we relax, where we believe nothing bad can reach us. But this story proves that even behind locked doors, danger can find a way in. Denise Huskins was taken from her home, survived a nightmare, and then had to fight to be believed. Her story is not just about abduction. It is about trust, fear, and the cost of ignoring the truth. Cases like this remind us why real crime stories matter. They're not entertainment, they are warnings. They show us what can happen when systems fail and voices are dismissed. If this story stayed with you, remember this. Listen when someone speaks. Question what seems impossible. And never assume danger always looks obvious. Thank you for watching. If you want more real American true crime stories that expose the truth behind the headlines, subscribe, stay alert, and stay safe.